on YouTube on the Prezi channel over here, so you guys can get all your videos of these lectures. It's a mix of your guys' class and, of course, Group 1. I basically, as I said, I chose the ones that I performed a little bit better than, or the ones I felt I would have explained the concept better in. So you will basically get the entire syllabus. So yeah, I have put the link up on um, on VC Learn. I think I've also put it up on Teams. I will put it up in this chat as well, just so that you always have it. So in terms of today, what we're going to do is there might be some things that overlap. We are going to go through all our different types of attacks against different types of network-based attacks, and we're going to look at how servers are attacked. So a few new things, and I will just touch on one of the things I mentioned, or a few of the things I mentioned in our last lecture. So just remember, there are several types of attack that target networks, or processes that rely on a network. So if you think of any type of attack, they are either interception attacks or poisoning attacks. This is particularly for networks, right? If we want to extend it, we got interception, poisoning, and impersonation. But we're not looking at the social aspect at all. We're looking at things that are far more, I would say, technical, and we're going to be looking at, as I say, network-based attacks. So some attacks are designed to intercept network communications. Typical examples of these are man in the middle, man in the browser, and reply attacks. So man in the middle is interception of legitimate communication and forging a fictitious response to the sender. So basically, the attacker picks up a communication and sends something fake back to the person. So this could be between two users, as shown in this picture, or the second user could be a server. So they pick up a response from the sender, they intercept it, and they send a fake response back to a certain server. So man in the middle, very, very common in terms of how it's used. And they use something known as public key infrastructure, which I am going to show you guys a very short video in. So how do we protect against man in the middle attacks? There's two ways. We can use SSL, or we can basically hard code our application in such a way that it prevents against these attacks. So in a sense, I'm going to show you guys both of these. I'm going to show you guys a short video on SSL and protecting against man in the middle of attacks. So first, I'm going to show you guys, just this video here, protecting against man in the middle attacks.
Alright guys, welcome back, and in this video I am going to talk to you about a few easy ways that you can defend against man-in-the-middle attacks. Now, the biggest recommendation I have is just never to use free public Wi-Fi. I mean, even if you go into some place and you're like, okay, they have a nice long, maybe a WPA passphrase, and their WPS pin is inactive, this looks like a pretty secure network. Even if you think it's a secure network, you still have no idea who is managing that router, that access point. It could be some dude and he could just be waiting there, waiting to claim your sensitive information. So if you use public Wi-Fi, then at least do not use it with your sensitive information, and I mean your bank account login, your email login, so on and so forth. Now, for those of you who need to use public Wi-Fi, there's just no way around it. Maybe you do for your job. Then these are a couple of things to look out for. First of all, whenever you go to a sensitive page, such as a login page, you need to make sure that it has a valid HTTPS certificate. Now, on the website that we made in the last video, you saw that whenever we went to www.bacon.com, it wasn't the real bacon.com, so we're never going to see one of those nice green certificates, and I'll show you guys what they look like. So this is the Bank of America webpage right here, and this is from my phone, and this is from the tablet. So any big company, and not even a big company, but any decent sized company, their website is going to have this green validation or certificate on their website. And this is basically saying this website is who we say they are. That's why these certificates were made up. Now, I want to say not every website, because maybe your friend has a forum and I don't know, maybe someone's working on like a tiny little website. Those login pages may not have it, but all of your big websites, Facebook, your banks, your Googles, your emails, keep an eye out for these, and if you don't see one, do not go to it. Now, another important thing you can do, especially on your home network, is lock out any unauthorized users. And you do so by using the techniques that we learned before. Make sure you have a really strong passphrase. Make sure that you disable WPS. And as you continue watching the series, you're going to learn about more vulnerabilities and how you can fix them. And that is because for some reason, a lot of people believe that whenever they have a phone or whatever, and they're talking to an access point, that there's just some kind of direct communication between the two. But they don't realize whenever you're using Wi-Fi, like I said before, it's almost the exact equivalent of shouting your information out to anyone that'll listen. So make sure anyone you don't trust, anyone but your friends and your family, they can't even access your network if they tried. I mean, as a general rule of thumb, look at this guy. Do you trust this guy? I don't. I mean, you have to think. Would you trust him with your 13-year-old daughter? No, you wouldn't. So why would you trust him with your Wi-Fi network, which is even more important? Because you know that this guy is just going to be like, oh, I'm an old guy. I just want to get on my iPhone and check my doctor's appointment. Sorry, Haas. No free Wi-Fi for you. And as we continue this series, I'm going to be explaining, like I said, a bunch of different things that you can do to protect yourself and your network against man-in-the-middle attacks, such as DNS spoofing. And it's different for if it's your network or you're just on the network. So for network administrators, there are intrusion detection software that you can use. And for individuals, like I said, we're going to be going over all of these techniques. But for now, thank you guys for watching. Just wanted to give you guys some real quick ideas. So there you go. See you next.
Okay, so yeah, TLS he's mentioned, very important, and it's basically built on this principle of public-private key infrastructure. So all of us have public keys, and this public key is available, and then to decrypt messages sent with the public key, the recipient needs a private key. And that's basically how public-private key infrastructure works in like 2 sentences, okay? So I am going to show you guys another video that shows you how it works exactly. Also important is man-in-the-browser attacks. So man-in-the-browser attacks intercepts communication between parties to steal or manipulate data. So this occurs between a browser and the underlying computer. So a man-in-the-browser attack usually begins with a Trojan infecting the computer and installing an extension. Guys, extensions and plugins can be pretty dicey. So when you think of adding an extension or an add-on to your Chrome browser, just make sure it's a legit one. So when the browser is launched, the extension is activated. Extension waits for a specific web page in which this user starts entering information. So basically the Trojan is triggered maybe when you go to your internet banking website, so Standard Bank, or to where you are going to actually transact, maybe even takealot.com. So when users submit, the extension captures all the data on the fields of the form, and they can even modify some of this information. So yes, advantages to these, most are distributed through a Trojan browser extension, and it's difficult to recognize that malicious code has been installed. An infected man in the browser may remain dormant for months until it's triggered by a user when they visit a certain website. So the software resides exclusively within the web browser, making it difficult for standard anti-malware software to detect it. Again, if you want to secure your website, you usually use SSL, which I'm going to show you guys another video on. And I will show you guys how to hard code your website to protect against these if you don't have SSL.
When we visit a website that features that little padlock in the corner of our browser, we're trusting it to keep our data safe. And whether it's our credit card numbers, sensitive work documents, or those questionable photos that you told your friend not to take, various types of encryption standards ensure that they are kept out of the prying hands of e-intruders, whatever, while they zip around on the internet. But aside from the reassuring little icon on your computer screen, what's actually going on? What is encryption? All right. So while today's video focuses on encryption on the web specifically, and the procedures used for encrypting data can be massively complex, the fundamental idea behind all encryption is really quite simple. Whenever you transfer encrypted information, your computer turns that data into an unintelligible mess or ciphertext that can only be put back into a readable form by unlocking it with a key of some sort that tells the receiving computer how to decode the incoming message. This basic concept has actually been used to send secret messages since long before the invention of computers. Ciphers of various kinds have been used for thousands of years, and machines that could encode and decode messages were in use before the modern PC ever came along. Thomas Jefferson invented a wheel cipher that was nothing more than wooden discs around an axle. And then the Germans famously used a typewriter-like device called the Enigma machine to encrypt military messages during World War II, although the Allies were able to crack that code. Now back to the web era. Modern electronics often use a widespread encryption scheme called public key encryption. Suppose you want to send an email. When you click send, the receiving computer will provide your computer with what's called a public key. A public key is generated by the computer just randomly choosing a very large number and running it through some mathematical functions. Once your computer receives this public key, it uses the key to lock the email using a special algorithm, then sends it on its way. Now, since anyone can request a public key from a computer, the public key can't be used to unlock a message. Otherwise, anyone could intercept and read your encrypted emails. That would defeat the purpose. Instead, the recipient's computer unlocks the message with a private key that is stored on that system alone, making it mercifully impossible for anyone else to view the terrible poetry you sent to your girlfriend that has her rethinking things. Public key encryption isn't just used for email. It's actually the basis of tons of websites that require you to sign in securely. If you've ever clicked on that little padlock and saw a mention of SSL or TLS, these are two implementations of public key encryption that are widely used by Google, Facebook, Microsoft, and many more to make sure that only you can access your data or change your settings. Now, once the sensitive data actually arrives at its destination, there are a number of other encryption methods used to make sure it can sit on the computer or server safely. For example, you probably have a password and credit card number stored with Amazon, for example. How do they keep those things safe? Often web servers will hash your passwords, meaning that they're converted into encrypted strings of text through a process that is extremely difficult to reverse and can't be unlocked with a key. Now, with all that said, it is important to remember that no system of encryption is perfect, and experts in the field are constantly searching for weaknesses in encryption algorithms and devising new ones to outsmart hackers. So next time you're G-chatting a friend about how awesome the latest episode of Tech Quickie was, remember that it was really an epic digital arms race that allowed you to do that without everyone knowing exactly how much of your free time you spend listening to me talk. Speaking of...
Okay, guys, so yeah, I like that he mentioned hashing and basically, yeah, hashing and salting passwords. I want to actually show you guys the third year project, and it's basically a website. It's nothing wonderful in terms of what it looks like, but I do want to show you guys how we implement security to this, because you guys are going to be doing this in probably the next 2 years. So what I'm doing now is I'm just starting up the server and connecting to the database, so that we can then access the database and we can create a username and password. There we are. Yes, connected to database, beautiful stuff. And the second thing I'm doing, because there's two basic servers on this particular website, there's a server that hosts the front end in terms of what the user is seeing, and the back end is hosted by, is basically got the database. And we've got to get authentication from the server that has the database linked to it to allow us to basically get into that website securely. So yeah, so this is Angular, by the way, so it does sometimes take a while. So while it is happily starting up there, I will just continue a bit because it can take just a few minutes. So yeah, man in the browser attacks, replay attacks. Attacker makes a copy of a transmission before sending it to the original recipient. So it works a lot like your man in the middle attack. So they make a copy, they use it at a later time. So why is this relevant? Because they can capture things like your login credentials. How do we prevent these attacks? Both sides can negotiate and create a random key that is valid for a limited time period for a specific process. So yeah, that actually is another thing that we are going to look at here, and use timestamps in all messages and reject any messages that fall outside that window of time. So let's see how this is going. ngserve, it's still compiling. I will show you guys this in a bit. Poisoning, on the other hand, there's 3 types of poisoning. The general definition of poisoning is the act of introducing a substance that harms or destroys. I think we all pretty much know that. There's, in terms of hacking though, there's ARP poisoning and DNS poisoning. And with ARP poisoning and DNS poisoning comes something called privilege escalation. So ARP poisoning, address resolution protocol. If an IP address for a device is known, but the MAC address of the computer or whatever the device is not, the sending computer sends an ARP packet to determine the MAC address. So MAC addresses are stored in the ARP cache for future reference. All computers that hear the ARP reply and also cache the data. So in terms of ARP poisoning, it relies upon MAC spoofing, which is imitating another computer by means of changing the MAC address. And what can we do with this? We can steal data. An attacker can substitute their own MAC address and steal data intended for another device. They can prevent internet access. An attacker can substitute an invalid MAC address for the network gateway so that no users can actually access the external networks. They can basically initiate man-in-the-middle attacks. The man-in-the-middle device can be set to receive all communications by substituting that MAC address. And of course, our main one, denial of service. The valid IP address of the target can be substituted with an invalid MAC address, causing all designated traffic of the target for the target to fail. So, yeah, wonderful. We've compiled successfully. If I go to the website, which is this. Okay, so basically it's a posting site, and to yeah, as see, third year student said, oh, I can't believe it works, but he did make it work very well. So if we are going to sign up, right, and I want you guys to pay attention to more over the console over here, which is why I've made it rather long here. Let's say we want to sign up to this website. So I'm just going to go lol3. Now I've used lol3 and I've done a lot of demonstrations of this. lol4@gmail.com. My password is going to be lol12345678. I'm going to sign up. So when I sign up, this user is created in my database, okay? And check this out. My email that's captured in the cache of my browser is hashed and salted, meaning if there's somebody tries to do a man in the browser attack, they're not going to get my password. It's hashed. This is supposed to be lol12345678. And generally you can make the hash as complex as you want. It's basically an algorithm that you use. So if I go to my code here, what I've done here is I've used bcrypt, and I'm hashing this using a certain algorithm, right? So it does a mathematical formula. I'm going to hash it about 10 times. So it encrypts my password, basically. How cool is that, guys? You guys are going to code this in the next 2 years. Well, when you're in third year. Now, another cool thing I want to show you guys is token authentication, which we're going to talk about. So I've signed up my user, right? I'm now going to log in. And I'm going to log in with the same, I think it's lol4 this time, lol4@gmail.com. Yeah, it is awesome. And my password, as you will remember, I went lol1234567 8. And if I go log in, it gives me this token, right? So it's basically this, I am using this token to say, I am a legitimate user, okay? The tokens are very, very important. They prevent not just man-in-the-middle attacks, but they also prevent session hijacking. So now I can happily create a post and delete it and do all this other awesome stuff. But this token also, mind you, we've set up in the code to last for just expire, in 1 hour. So basically, if a user is idle and they will be logged out of the system, and to log in again, they would need to get another token, or another token will be generated for them. So yes, this is basically what you guys are going to be coding up in third year. It's going to be really, really fun then when you do application development security. So yeah, everything we're basically talking about now in terms of all these attacks, you guys are going to be protecting against these particular attacks. I will show you guys a little bit more code in terms of how we would protect against other attacks as well. DNS poisoning. Now they talk about DNS poisoning in your textbook, and they make it really much more complex than it actually is. I actually did a Google search for DNS poisoning, which made a lot more sense in terms of its definition. So DNS poisoning, also known as DNS spoofing, is a type of attack that exploits vulnerabilities in the domain name system. And the reason for this is to divert internet traffic away from legitimate servers and towards fake ones. So it's a lot like clickjacking, except of course it's using the DNS, right? So one of the reasons DNS poisoning is so dangerous is because it can spread from one DNS to another DNS server. And yeah, so what can this cause? It can cause an entirely huge denial of service attack. It can basically cause an intense form of clickjacking, which we're going to look at in a bit. Privilege escalation basically means that you can basically earn the rights of another user. And yes, this could be harmful, because I can just take a very simple example of this. If you attack a certain website, let's say you attack the student portal, right? And you get the admin person's rights. If you get the admin person's rights, it allows you the power to change marks, delete marks, do a whole host of things that can be very harmful for that specific systems. So in terms of, they do this by exploiting a software vulnerability to gain access to resources that you would normally be restricted from. So there's two types of privilege escalation. One of this is vertical privilege escalation. So this is when a lower privilege user accesses functions restricted to higher privilege users. So exactly what I said, if you try and attack the student portal and you get admin's rights, that's higher privilege than yours, because currently your rights are only read-only. So if you go to your student portal, you can only look at your marks, but you can't do anything with them. Admin can look at your marks, they can delete them, they can upload new marks, so they have a lot more privilege than you. When user is restricted with restricted privilege access, accesses different restricted functions that are similar, it's horizontal privilege escalation. So basically, it's like you hacking into a set of accounts that are other students. So all that you can really then do is basically look at their marks as well. So it's similar in terms of functionality. So server attacks, we've seen some of these already. We've looked at denial of service attack. Web server application attacks we looked at in the last lecture. Those were our cross-site scripting, our injection attacks. Hijacking we will look at today. Yeah, pretty much all of the rest of these we will look at. Denial of service, I'm just going to go over. A deliberate attempt to prevent authorized users from accessing a system by overwhelming it with requests. The security principle that denial of service violates is availability. It makes resources unavailable so that legitimate users cannot use a certain website. So most denial of service attacks are distributed denial of attacks. Basically, it means they use hundreds and thousands of devices to flood the server with requests. Another type of DNS attack is called a Smurf attack. So the attacker broadcasts a network requests to all computers on the network, but changes the address from which the request came from. So it appears as if the victim's computer is asking for a request from all the computers on the network, and all the computers send a response to the victim's computer so that it is overwhelmed. So there's a few types of these, right? There's an DNS amplification attack, so it floods the victim by redirecting valid responses to it. There's also a SYN flood, and a SYN flood basically takes advantages of procedures for initiating a session. So in a SYN flood attack against a web server, the attacker sends SYN segments in IP packets to the server. So an attacker modifies the source address of each of these packets to computer addresses that do not exist or cannot be reached. So a lot of the requests are therefore invalid, and the service can't differentiate then between your legitimate requests and your invalid ones. And basically when that happens, your system becomes unavailable or your server goes down. So we've spoken about zero-day attacks. That's web server attacks, by the way. These are still on our network attacks. Cross-site scripting we spoke about as well. I want to show you guys injection we spoke about. I want to show you guys cross-site request forgery as well, even though they don't really explicitly talk about it in your textbook. It is another one that you have to look out for. So yes, I'm going to show you guys a short video on cross-site request forgery so you understand it just a little bit.
Welcome to the Hacksplaining video tutorial series. This video will teach you about cross-site request forgery attacks. When creating a website, we tend to code the client side and the server side together. We build the pages and forms a user will interact with on the client side, then build the server-side URLs that respond when the user performs an action. However, requests can be triggered to the server-side code from anywhere, not just the client-side code we write. This is one of the most powerful aspects of how the internet is designed. It allows linking between sites. But it is also the cause of a common security flaw, cross-site request forgery, CSRF. A CSRF attack occurs when a user is tricked into interacting with a page or script on a third-party site that generates a malicious request to your site. All your server will see is an HTTP request from an authenticated user. However, an attacker takes control over the form of the data sent in the request to cause mischief. Imagine you run the microblogging service Twitter that allows your users to shout their opinions at each other in 140-character sized chunks. Mal is a hacker who has noticed that posts on your service are created using GET requests. This means that all the information is carried in the URL of the HTTP request. Mal modifies the post creation URL to include a malicious payload. Now he has to find some way to get a victim to visit the URL in their browser. Vic is one of your users. Mal has been able to guess his email address. Mal sends Vic an email with a very tempting link, pointing to the crafted URL. Vic clicks on the link. Your server interprets the request as Vic writing a post and creates a new item on his timeline. This is not the action that Vic intended, but he may not quite have noticed what just occurred. The post is designed to be enticing enough that other users of your site will click on it. When they do, They will be tricked in the same way Vic was. You now have a worm on your site, as each user who clicks the link will open up a new set of potential victims. Bad news. Knowing how to protect against forged requests is essential for every web developer. Click on the link to learn how to protect yourself, or move on to the next video.
Okay, so how do we wonderfully protect ourselves? Facebook. Yeah, how do we protect ourselves? Very much, okay, in terms of this website here, what did we do to protect ourselves? That's the one I just pretty much showed you over here. So I think you guys might have learned about get and post requests in NWEG. Yes or no? Guys, have you looked at get and post requests in NWEG? Yeah, like your packets. When you're sending packets across a network, you either have get requests or post requests. Now, get requests are when all the information in the packet is stored in the URL, and post is basically when it's in the body of a packet. Have you guys done that? Yes, no, maybe? Well, guys, you have to remember NWEG. I'm sure you guys did something about packets. So silence and no. Very briefly. I love your answer there, very briefly. Okay, so basically this bit of code over here that I'm showing you, don't worry if you don't quite 100% get it now, it's fine. This set of code over here basically says what we are going to allow in the header of our packets. So for now, we just said we're going to allow everything. If we want to allow methods, we can say we want to allow get methods, post methods. We can restrict the methods that we allow. And this wonderful thing here, this bit of code, X requested with, this protects against cross-site forgery attacks. Again, it's very simple to basically hard code security, I think, into your site. We're using the Angular framework for this particular website. So basically, we used a package called Helmet. And Helmet basically is for the security of your website. And this bit of code over here protects against cross-site scripting. So yeah, you can actually download libraries to basically do a lot of the functionality for you in terms of security for some sites, right? Which is, yeah, very, very helpful. So session hijacking. So for session hijacking, to protect against session hijacking, you use tokens, which I showed you guys earlier. So this is when an attacker attempts to impersonate users by stealing or guessing a session token. So session token is a random string assigned to an interaction between a user and a web application. And we've seen how that worked over here. It's this token here that they would want to steal so that they can, of course, steal the session. So an attacker can attempt to obtain the session token by using cross-site scripting, but we have protected against that in two ways. We've used X requested with over here to restrict our packets, and we've used Helmet. Eavesdropping on a transmission, or simply guessing the session token. Now this, of course, is going to be a lot more difficult because, I mean, look at this. How are they going to guess this? Yeah, but yeah, people do that, guys. I don't know if they get it right or what the success rate of that is, but yeah. URL hijacking, also called typo jacking, and it's also called clickjacking because they just gave this one so many words. Oh, sorry, no. They call this URL jacking, but it's very similar to the way clickjacking works. So users are directed to a fake lookalike site. So this site is like filled with ads, and the attacker receives money for traffic generated for that site. So you could go to a site like, instead of typing google.com, somebody types goggle.com, and that site's going to have a whole lot of adverts, it's going to have surveys, and of course, when people go to the site, it generates traffic, which makes the attacker make a lot more money. So this is more, I would say, more like a passive sort of attack. Domain hijacking occurs when the domain pointer that links the domain name to a specific web server is changed by the threat actor. So why do we want to hijack it? The threat actor, by the way, guys, our threat actors are cyber criminals, our hacktivists, our cyber terrorists. Basically, they're talking about your hackers. This could even be a script kiddie, anyone who intends harm. Gains access to the domain control panel and redirects the registered domain to a different physical web server. So they are basically trying to gain access to a certain session. Clickjacking hijacks a mouse click. So the user is tricked into clicking a link that is other than what it appears to be. So this could be a small iframe that you place on your website. So you sort of trick the user into clicking it. So clickjacking often relies upon threat actors who craft a 0-pixel iframe. So basically, your iframes is short. It's an HTML element that allows embedding into another HTML document. So you use iframes to embed YouTube videos into websites, to embed various media from other sites into your website. So a 0-pixel iframe is virtually invisible to the naked eye, and you will put this iframe very close to the URL. So when the user is going to click close to the URL, they are redirected to another site. So clickjacking, how do we protect against it? There's a lot of different ways to protect against it. You could use your helmet. Well, if you are doing a Angular guard, but mostly it's this one over here. It's this bit of code here, helmet, frame guard, same origin. This generally protects against this particular attack over here, because it doesn't allow that particular 0-pixel iframe. So yeah, quite but this obviously is from the perspective of your developer. Like, from the developer, I need to protect against all these things. How do I code my application so that these things don't happen? There's no guarantees always in security. So remember that, guys. Even though there's like, oh, there's all this fancy code that we can use, there's all these packages we can implement into our website, they can still be a vulnerability somewhere in your website that an attacker can basically try and exploit. So that's why we always have to be extra vigilant. Overflow attacks are designed to overflow areas of memory with instructions from the attacker. So we've got buffer overflow attacks and integer overflow attacks. Buffer overflow attacks occurs when a process attempts to store data in RAM beyond the boundaries of a fixed length storage buffer. So what happens in this scenario over here? Can you use more than just one method to protect? No, you can use as many methods as possible to protect. They won't really end up conflicting with each other too much. But yeah, remember we said security is layered. So you can use the more layers you use, the more safe your application is. But of course, sometimes the more layers you use, the more inconvenient it is to the user. So you sort of are balancing that whole security versus convenience. So just a very simple example of this would be, if we had authentication to our bank website, if every time we logged on to our banking website, we had to put in an OTP, we'd get annoyed. Oh my gosh, there's this double layer of security. However, of course, it'll be more convenient if we didn't have to put in the OTP. But if we don't, there's one less layer of security. So yeah, you can have as many as possible. Buffer overflow attacks, or the goal of them, is to overflow memory locations. And we want to overflow memory locations so that legitimate requests coming to a certain server cannot be processed. So another thing that they can do is overflow the buffer with a new address that points to malware code. And malware code can do pretty much anything that the attacker would have programmed it to do. Delete files, it could reformat hard drives. So it's basically whatever the attacker chooses to do over here. Your integer overflow attack, on the other hand, is more used for, I would say, sabotage. So it's a condition that occurs when the result of an arithmetic operation exceeds the maximum size of an integer type used to store in it. So this also goes to your backend database and how you've set it up. So an integer overflow attack, an attacker changes the value of a variable to something outside the range that the programmer has intended to use by allowing an integer overflow. So basically, it's used in the following situations. So a program that calculates the cost of items purchased, or total cost of items purchased, would use the number of units sold times cost per unit. If an integer overflow were introduced, it could result in a negative value, resulting in a negative total cost. So basically, it depends on how you would set up your database, how you would set up your data types, and how the programmer would have done this. So your attackers look for all different angles. So especially when they see something that involves a calculation, they're going to try and sabotage that calculation somehow. And that can, of course, result in an integer overflow attack. So even a large positive value in a bank transfer could be wrapped around an integer overflow attack to become a negative value. So this thus reverses the flow of money. So it can, of course, be quite a harmful thing. Advertising attacks. Oh my gosh, I think we would have seen so many of these in our lives. There's two very common: malvertising and ad fraud. So with malvertising, our basic hackers use third-party advertising networks to distribute malware to unsuspecting users who visit a well-known site. So an ad contains the malware and redirects visitors who receive it to the attacker's web page. And on the attacker's web page, a Trojan is then downloaded to the user's computer, or ransomware. Preventing it is very difficult. So website operators are often unaware of the type of ads that are being displayed. Users also have a false sense of security by going to a mainstream website. And turning off ads that support plugins like Adobe Flash often disrupts the user's web experience. So again, security versus convenience. Yeah, we don't really want to turn off Adobe Flash, or we don't want to turn off plugins for the website. But if I do, yeah, it basically means I'm safer, but I'm not getting the experience. Ad fraud. Threat actors manipulate pre-roll ads to earn ad revenue that is directed back to them. So they basically create a robo browser, or they've created one called MethBot, and it spoofs all the necessary interactions to initiate, carry out, and complete ad auctions. So there's so much of ad fraud, guys. If you go to any website, even if it's not a legitimate website, I would say not legitimate, like you go to a streaming site to stream movies or series, and of course these sites are not exactly the most legal in the world, you are going to be hit with tons of adverts. And a lot of these are stored on within your browser. And you'll notice that you'll have some points where you on Google Chrome, after you visited a specific website, and you're getting tons of these ads in the right-hand corner, just coming up over and over again. 1, 2, 3 movies. Yes, I was talking about the exact same site. Yeah, I know, Asanda. I used the same website, or used it a lot prior, and I had to literally reinstall Chrome a few times because it did some crazy things in terms of this this whole ad fraud situation. Browser vulnerabilities, guys. So web browser editions have introduced vulnerabilities, and as I've mentioned before, guys, be so careful when you are adding an extension or a plugin to your browser, because a lot of them look like they are so legit, and you add them on and you don't know about the developer that's actually developed them. You don't know if they can be stealing your information. A lot of these extensions are quite dodgy in a lot of ways. Trying to watch movies and then single moms in the area. Yep, tell me about it. Yeah, that actually happened to me a few times in class. While I'm showing the students something, sexy singles in your area, I'm like, oh no, this again. Let me reinstall Chrome. So yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. So yeah, so be careful in terms of browser vulnerabilities, because the easiest thing for an attacker to hit is the browser, which is why, and I love showing up because I think the third years just did an amazing job this year. That is why we hash passwords, so that you know that every time a user goes to your website and you introduce this hashing, if I didn't have the code, right? So let's go back here to this very perfect looking Angular application. If I didn't have this bit of code over here. So basically what I'm saying here, guys, in very, very short, is every time somebody signs up to this website, so post means basically save the user, right? I want to hash the password, and basically I'm going to pass the email in the console. When I pass the password, I'm not passing the password, because if I was, it would be rec.body.password, meaning over here, anybody who basically can listen in on my browser would be able to see the password. I don't want the password to be shown. I want the hash of that password to be shown. I don't really mind if that's the case. And that's basically the purpose of this bit of code over here. What have I done? I've hashed the password. So let's take a look at it. So this, guys, is lol 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8, which would be very difficult for an outsider or a hacker to decrypt. So you guys are going to be doing this in, as I say, probably next year you guys are in second year. In third year you guys will be doing this very same thing. Yeah, so browser-based attacks, we know that browsers are quite vulnerable. Scripting code is pretty much the worst. It's the most easy to basically implement, and we use scripting code for websites in a big way. So JavaScript is a big one, and basically your JavaScript instructions are embedded inside your HTML document. So your JavaScript is basically providing functionality to your website. It's so easy to add malicious JavaScript programs that can be used to either transmit user information without the user's knowledge, or to basically catch, or to basically steal session tokens. There's just a whole host of things that can be done with scripting languages. Extensions. So your extensions expand the normal capabilities of the web browser. Most of them, again, written in JavaScript. So even though they can support dynamic actions, they can actually be quite harmful in certain ways. So plugins add new functionality to a browser, so users can play music, new videos, or use special graphical images. Yeah, the most common plugins support Java as well. So your add-ons, extensions, and plugins all have to come from legit sources, guys. Otherwise, they can be quite harmful because people can get your information. So Yeah. So due to risks associated with extensions, plugins, and add-ons, efforts are being made to minimize these actually. So some websites actually now block plugins. Um, yeah. So also HTML5 standardizes sound and video formats, so plugins are no longer actually needed. So there's um, less need for Adobe Flash or so yeah, Flash players. So yeah, guys, basically we've come to the end of Learning Unit 2. What we're going to do now is we're pretty much going to watch a video together and we're going to look and see what types of attacks have been used, right? So as you're watching the video, I know that the guy does say which attack is used for most of the time, but let's say if we can also identify these because you guys, we have gone through quite a few of these at the moment. So let's go to, yeah, top cyber attacks.
Well, hey there, you're looking well today. These days, we're online for everything. Whether it's your laptop, desktop computer, or cell phone, we put a lot of personal information online. And we mostly assume that this information will be safe, but the following cases show that increasingly often that's just not true. And today's video is sponsored by NordVPN, who is helping me bring this information to you. So let's get into it. Here are the 10 most devastating cyber attacks in history. Number 10 is the Ashley Madison hack. The Ashley Madison hack is perhaps the most embarrassing cyber attack of all. In 2015, the company Ashley Madison discovered that its private servers had been accessed by a hacking group known as the Impact Team. This group then threatened to release all of the information that they had to the public if Ashley Madison did not shut down the company. The reason for this was that Ashley Madison specialized in allowing married people to have affairs discreetly. Ashley Madison refused to shut down, and so 25 gigabytes of user data was released, and this exposed Ashley Madison's users publicly. It was also revealed that only 12,000 of the 5.5 million registered users were female, and most of those were created from a fake IP address. Cheated by the cheaters. I guess not all cyber.
Okay, guys, so the people who have launched this attack, first of all, what are they? Are they hacktivists, cyber criminals, cyber terrorists? What do you guys think that they are? Hacktivists, yes. Yeah, 100%. Hacktivists, okay, so they're not really stealing money, right? They asked for the site to be shut down because they don't believe that having affairs is morally correct. So it's their own ideology, right? 100% they are hacktivists. So they're not asking for any, yeah, it's their ideology. So they're not really asking for money. They're not really, they just basically shut your site down and we won't expose your users. So yeah, 100%.
Attacks are that bad. Number 9 is the Mafia Boy attack. Mafia Boy was the alternate ego of Michael Kals, who, in 2000, caused substantial damage to a series of high-profile websites, including Amazon, eBay, and Yahoo. He did this through a series of
Okay, yes, he did it through
denial of service attacks. Abbreviated as DDoS, this type of attack is a common tactic involving overwhelming websites with queries to the point that they no longer function. Mafia Boy used this approach and rendered its targets useless for hours. This resulted in millions of dollars worth of lost revenue. Naming the attack Project Revolta, Kals was revealed to be a high school student at the time, obsessed with making a name for himself as a hacker. And he got that popularity, and I'm sure he's going to be just as popular when he's bending over in jail. Well, he didn't actually go to jail. After being sentenced to 1 year probation, Kals published a book about his experiences. And they say crime doesn't pay. Number 8 is the Soviet...
Guys, do you know how he got caught? he bragged about it to his friends and on a chat room. So, so in a way, he sort of actually wanted to get caught. Yeah, they didn't quite catch him. He pretty much started, stupid. But well, he was 15 at the time, so.
Pipeline explosion. The 1982 Soviet pipeline incident involved a computer attack which was directly responsible.
Mistakes are always made in the heat of passion.
For a massive explosion. During the Cold War, the Soviets attempted to steal computer software used to oversee pump valves in gas pipes. Knowing this, the CIA deliberately placed a Trojan virus inside their software. When the Soviets attempted to use the software to operate a massive gas pipeline in Siberia, the Trojan horse took control of the valves and closed them. This created massive amounts of pressure, the result being the largest non-nuclear explosion ever seen from space. Unbelievably and thankfully, there were no casualties, but the CIA achieved their dream of disrupting the Soviet gas industry, which had massive economic implications for them. Well, at least we're all friends now, right? Right?
This one, I would say, definitely falls into cyber terrorism. It's just quite an extreme type of attack. Yeah, how they did it, that's pretty much a mystery. It's actually going to be interesting to see how they would have done it exactly. I know it's a Trojan horse, as he said, but man, to get software to control hardware, it's called embedded software. So you use software to control a certain bit of something that's actually physical. And that software is usually very complicated. Those guys are pretty brilliant, whoever hacked it.
Number 7 is the Sony hack.
We know this one.
Also known as the Sony picture hack, this 2014 cyber attack allegedly from North Korea made international headlines. At the time, Sony Pictures was pushing forward with a film about the North Korean regime called The Interview. Painting the North Korean chain of command in a poor light, to say the least, North Korea threatened that there would be dire consequences if the film was ever released. Oh, and consequences there were. Hackers were able to download private emails from Sony servers along with copies of unreleased films and personal details of Sony employees and their families. Some of the information released was extremely damaging for Sony, including private insults made at the expense of some of its stars. In one email, a Sony producer referred to Angelina Jolie as a minimally talented spoiled brat. Oh, ouch.
Interview, yes. See, someone watched the movie. Yeah, so what would you call this, guys? Hacktivism, cyber terrorism? What would you call this attack? Cyber terrorism, yeah. Hacktivist terrorism, yeah. Yeah.
Number 6 is the Yahoo theft. Some cyber attacks are so effective that the victims don't even know that it's happening until years later. Well, that was the case with Yahoo. The one-time most popular search engine in the world has seen a number of instances where user data has been stolen by hackers. In 2014, an estimated 500 million accounts were hacked. This gave hackers access to usernames, passwords, as well as other sensitive material which could be used to commit identity fraud. But unbelievably, it took Yahoo 4 years to discover that an even bigger hack had taken place during 2013. When they finally discovered the theft, they estimated that as many as 1 billion user accounts had been compromised. These historic hacks were so large that even the US Senate decided to investigate them. And to this day, nobody knows who was responsible for them or if they'll strike again. Maybe it's because it's Yahoo, and if any of you are still using Yahoo, you kind of deserve it. What's wrong with you? Number 5 is the Shamoon virus.
Gmail for the win. Yep, Gmail for the win.
Security experts warn that energy suppliers could be targeted by hackers. Such an attack could render a country immobile. Imagine no electricity. But this isn't a purely hypothetical situation. Hackers have already targeted energy suppliers in the past. For example, the Shamoon virus was developed in 2012 and was released by a group of hackers known as Cutting Swords of Justice. Okay, that's actually kind of a badass name, the Cutting Swords of Justice? The virus was used to undermine the energy company Saudi Aramco. When the virus was unleashed, it infected more than 30,000 computers at the company, shutting down their entire network. Then, to make things worse, the virus spread to other energy companies. But the most interesting thing is that if such an attack happened today, it's still unclear how quickly a power grid would even recover. Too many kids growing up with these dang computers. No more Minecraft.
So guys, yeah, power grids. Do you think that's the case with ESCOM? Do you think a virus is the reason we're going through this? Virus? No. You think it's just general bad governance? It's not. That's not it. Yeah, nah, definitely not.
For you. Number 4 is Titan Rain. It was during the early 2000s that cyber attacks began to ramp up, with Titan Rain being one of the most notorious. This virus targeted American computer networks and affected a number of US government contractors such as Redstone Arsenal and Lockheed Martin. Not exactly small names. And it even spread to NASA. Titan Rain's main objective was to gather intel from these organizations. And that sounds dangerous to me because I don't know what kind of space secrets that NASA's holding. Maybe there's aliens. The virus sought out and transmitted sensitive data to an unknown source. This most likely included highly classified technology that was still under development. What is that, a shrink gun? I'm short enough as is, nope. The UK also found itself under attack from Titan Rain and firmly pointed the finger at China as a source. This created a serious international incident as the British Ministry of Defense struggled to hold on to its classified files. Where's James Bond when you need him? Moneypenny, is that a virus? I'm not good with computers. Number 3 is Operation Shady Rat. This one might win the award for Best Name Tag. In 2008, a startling claim was made by a group of hackers that no website was safe. This might seem like common knowledge today, but back then, many government and consumer websites spread the idea that emerging online systems were unhackable. A group of hardcore hackers from China put this claim to the test. The hackers numbered more than 10,000 and claimed to have hacked every website imaginable, even the Pentagon. They also alleged that they were occasionally hired by the Chinese government to carry out such cyber attacks. After claiming that they had been able to access some of the most top secret documents in the United States, the Pentagon then conceded that its systems had been bypassed a number of times. The myth of the unhackable website was dispelled and people started fearing nerds everywhere. The meek shall inherit the earth. Number 2 is the Kuji and DataStream Cowboy. In 1994, 2 hackers going by the names of Kuji and DataStream Cowboy, by the way, best names ever, managed to infiltrate so many US military systems that they could have potentially started a nuclear war. By outthinking the Pentagon's security protocols, both men gained access to battlefield simulation, which laid bare US strategies. They also intercepted sensitive information sent by undercover agents in North Korea. And possibly most worryingly, the hackers gained access to a research facility in South Korea which held information about atomic research. Of the 2 men, Kuji was the most dangerous, and according to Special Agent Jim Christie, he nearly started a 3rd World War. Oh, and by the way, this was all achieved with a Commodore Amiga. Gotta look out for these retro gamers.
Yeah, guys, wow, how technology has changed. So yes, again, I think we can agree, these guys, cyber terrorists, yeah, I don't know. These guys really use their knowledge for such crazy, crazy things. Yeah, hopefully our next 3rd World War doesn't start with something like this.
And number 1 is WannaCry. The WannaCry cyber attack is perhaps the most devastating and far-reaching hack seen so far. It used ransomware which shut down computer systems completely. The hackers then offered to unlock these systems for a price. The crazy thing is that this blackmail was on a global scale. WannaCry affected an unprecedented 230,000 computers around the world across 150 different countries. Hackers demanded $600 worth of cryptocurrency for each computer which was blocked. But in a bizarre twist of fate, many believe that WannaCry was based on a US government program called Eternal Blue, which had been leaked publicly not long before. But the most damaging aspect of this attack was that it shut down 70,000 computers at the British National Health Service and resulted in some patients having to postpone treatment. Listen, calling all white hat, gray hat, black hat hackers, whatever you want to be, just don't dick with people's lives. You know what I'm saying? If you want to just test security or steal some money, that's one thing, but don't hurt people. You're gonna make me cry. Whew, you know, these cases were a little scary, but there is a way of helping prevent it from happening to you. Use a VPN. NordVPN is a super fast virtual private network that keeps your information safe while browsing, whether it's on your own Wi-Fi or public Wi-Fi, which is even more important. It's much more important than you might think. In fact, I use it and I absolutely love it. And you can get it now by clicking the link in the description. Seriously.
Okay, guys, so yeah, won't you like to use that as an excuse? Okay, guys, so yeah, we looked at all these different types of hacks, and the awesome thing now is when you see any video like this, you can sort of put your mind and think, okay, how did they do this? What type of attack did they use? Did they use a denial of service? Did they use a virus? Did they use a Trojan? Yeah, and what type of malware they used. So yeah, in addition, I did take a look at your guys' new take-home test. So don't worry, we will be discussing it very, very soon, probably in our next lecture. So they've released a new take-home test on the portal. I will put it up on VC Learn as well and on Teams. When my electricity wonderfully comes back, I will do all of these things. And I am also going to put up today's video as well. So as I said earlier, in case you were not here at the time, I did mention this. This is the YouTube channel for Prezi, where I'm going to put up all the recordings. So I will put up today's recording here as well. So it's basically all the sessions we've done. I'm going to copy and paste this yet again for you guys in the chat, just so you have it. So basically, I did go through all things in terms of content in the lectures. I did cut off some of the activities, though, just so that you know that. Just so that we didn't have this intensely long video, I did manage to cut off some of the activities. So